A maniac kept a girl trapped in a barrel for 5 years while the police searched for her in vain. While staking out a house where a wanted criminal might be hiding, 3 detectives, Carl Mørck, Anker, and Hardy, wait for backup. However, Carl grows suspicious of the eerie calm around them. Ignoring orders, he decides to enter the house immediately. Inside, they discover a decomposing corpse, realizing they may have arrived too late. Suddenly, the armed suspect ambushes them. In the ensuing shootout, Anker is killed, Hardy is critically injured, and Carl sustains a graze to the head, forced to witness the devastating consequences of his rash decision. 3 months later, Carl has undergone physical and psychological recovery, including therapy. Upon returning to work, he asks his superior, Marcus Jacobson, for new assignments. However, Marcus notices Carl's trembling hands and deems him unfit for homicide work. Additionally, no one in the department is willing to partner with him, fearing for their safety. Consequently, Marcus reassigns Carl to Department Q, a dusty basement archive for cold cases. Carl protests, feeling it's beneath him, but he can't overturn the decision. Disillusioned, Carl visits Hardy in the hospital. Though alive, Hardy is paralyzed and bitter, asking Carl to stop visiting because it reminds him of their failed operation. Despite his wife's support, Hardy believes she'll eventually leave him. At one point, he even pleads with Carl to end his suffering, a request Carl cannot fulfill. Back home, Carl struggles with his trembling hands and watches crime news to stay connected to the field. Attempting to fix his personal life, he calls a woman he once dated, but she rebuffs him, asking him to forget her number. The next day, Carl reluctantly reports to Department Q, where he meets his new assistant, Assad, a cheerful man who loves strong coffee and questionable music. Carl suggests Assad request a transfer, but Assad is thrilled with the position, seeing it as a promotion despite his lack of investigative experience. For years, Assad dealt only with clerical work, so even a basement archive feels like progress to him. Initially uninterested in the cold cases, Carl considers calling his boss to complain. However, his attention shifts to a wall of files that Assad has organized. One case in particular catches his eye: the disappearance of Lynggaard. 5 years earlier, Merida, a prominent politician, vanished from a ferry. Officially, her case was ruled a suicide, and Assad suggests they simply write a report to close it. However, Carl finds the circumstances suspicious and decides to reopen the case. He's particularly struck by the fact that Merida brought her mentally disabled brother, Ufa, on the ferry. Carl argues that someone planning to end their life wouldn't leave a vulnerable sibling behind like that. 5 years earlier, Merida was a charismatic public figure, rallying large crowds and inspiring voters. At home, however, her life revolved around caring for Ufa. After a car accident in their childhood claimed their parents, Ufa's mental health deteriorated. He became withdrawn, unable to function without constant supervision. Despite her demanding career, Merida always made time for him, often playing board games in the evenings. One night, Merida heard a strange sound and found Ufa awake, standing by the window as though greeting someone in the darkness. Little did she know, this unsettling moment was only the beginning of a chain of events that would lead to her mysterious disappearance. Carl and Assad decide to launch a full-scale investigation to uncover what really happened to Merida. They start by reviewing witness statements from the ferry. According to multiple accounts, Merida arrived by car with her younger brother, Ufa. Initially, they didn't draw much attention, but at some point, an argument broke out. Ufa shoved his sister, causing a scene. However, Carl finds this odd. Just before the argument, they were seen having dinner. He reasons that someone planning to commit suicide wouldn't bother with a meal. The witness statements are inconsistent, but Carl and Assad work to piece together a timeline. One witness recalls seeing Ufa walk off with a man in a long coat. Meanwhile, a drunken passenger accidentally stumbled into Merida in the men's restroom. Shortly after, she was seen running onto the deck, where she vanished. Based on this, Carl concludes that Merida and Ufa weren't arguing as reported. Instead, it seems Merida lost sight of her brother and frantically began searching for him, leading her first to the restroom and then onto the deck. The detectives are getting closer to the truth, though they have yet to learn the full story. Unbeknownst to them, Merida's search eventually led her to the vehicle deck, where Ufa had gone. Just as she was about to find him, a man in a long coat attacked her. Using chloroform, he rendered her unconscious. When Merida awoke, she was trapped in a confined, sterile space. She soon realized she was the captive of a deranged maniac who had placed her inside a hyperbaric chamber. The man taunted her, illuminating the chamber with a harsh light to capture her attention. He informed her coldly that she would never leave. The setup included 2 buckets, one for waste, the other for food. The captor promised to replace them daily, but not before increasing the chamber's pressure to 2 atmospheres, causing severe hearing issues and other health problems for Merida. He warned her that he wouldn't return for a full year, urging her to accept her grim new reality. To keep her sanity, Merida engages in daily physical exercises and memory routines, trying to preserve her mental clarity. Each morning, she repeats her name and her brother Ufa's birth date, holding on to the one person who means the most to her. Trapped in the hyperbaric chamber with its relentless pressure, every minute is a torment. Through the tiny window in her prison, she catches glimpses of her captor, struggling to understand his motives and the cruelty he inflicts. After a year, the torment intensifies when he raises the pressure even further, making her existence almost unbearable. Some time later, Merida starts experiencing severe dental problems. Her swollen jaw prevents her from eating properly, and she fears an infection. The maniac observes her suffering and, in his twisted way, decides to help. He provides her with pliers, forcing her to extract the tooth herself without any anesthetic. After a grueling effort, Merida smears the chamber's window with her blood, cutting off his view and denying him the pleasure of watching her pain. Enraged, the captor uses high-pressure torture to compel her to clean the glass. Meanwhile, Carl approaches the detective who originally worked the case 5 years earlier. The man, known for his lack of diligence, admits he ignored key evidence and suggests Carl close the case for good. Unwilling to give up, Carl presses on with Assad's support. They discover that Ufa, now living in a mental health facility, could hold vital clues. However, the staff warns that Ufa is deeply withdrawn, avoiding any memory of the traumatic event. Carl attempts to connect with him but fails to get a response. A nurse who has gained Ufa's trust over time reveals that he recognizes people by their scent, hinting at the depth of his detachment from reality. That evening, Carl retreats home to sift through everything related to Merida's disappearance. His focus is interrupted only by his teenage son, who, having fled his mother's home, decides to stay with Carl for a while. The next morning, Carl and Assad track down a witness who was aboard the ferry with Merida. The man, who had once pursued a romantic interest in her but was rejected, exhibits odd behavior and contradictory statements. Despite this, he doesn't seem directly suspicious. Assad then proposes a new approach, visiting Ufa daily. He believes that with patience and consistency, he can earn Ufa's trust. Given time, Ufa might reveal something crucial he witnessed, a piece of the puzzle that could finally unravel the mystery surrounding Merida's disappearance. Carl meets with Merida's secretary, seeking more insights into her personal life. The secretary describes Merida as a dominant and self-assured woman who frequently had multiple lovers. The last known lover was someone she met at a party in Sweden, but the secretary doesn't know his name. That evening, Carl returns home only to find his son with a girlfriend. Not wanting to intrude, he spends the night outside. The next morning, Carl and Assad conclude that Merida didn't disappear voluntarily. She was likely abducted. Their prime suspect could be her unknown lover. They submit a request to Swedish authorities to obtain lists and photos of all attendees at the party 5 years ago. The list includes hundreds of men, making the task daunting. To narrow their search, Carl and Assad acquire all photos taken at the event, scrutinizing them for interactions between Merida and any men. They hypothesize that one of these men could have been on the ferry the day she vanished. Their investigation hits a snag when Marcus, Carl's superior, discovers that Carl has been using departmental funds for his private inquiry. Furious, Marcus orders Carl to cease his investigation, reminding him that his current role is purely administrative. Despondent, Carl contemplates giving up, but Assad encourages him to persist. United in their determination, they vow to uncover the truth about Merida's fate. That evening, they return to the psychiatric facility to visit Ufa. Thanks to Assad's consistent visits, Ufa has begun to trust him. Assad shows Ufa several photographs, and one image causes Ufa to grow visibly anxious. This reaction leads Carl and Assad to identify the man who abducted Merida, Daniel Hale. A few days later, Carl and Assad travel to Sweden to confront Daniel about the events of 5 years ago. Along the way, they consult the local police and learn that Daniel died shortly after Merida's disappearance. The circumstances of his death, a drowning in a lake, raise suspicions. Upon arrival, Carl and Assad meet with a local officer and review the case files. The timing and details seem too coincidental to be mere chance. Their suspicions deepen when they visit the lake where Daniel drowned. Comparing photographs from the party, they make a startling discovery. The man Merida interacted with at the party isn't the real Daniel Hale. The abductor had assumed Daniel's identity and later killed him to eliminate a potential witness. With this revelation, Carl and Assad realize they are chasing a highly manipulative and dangerous individual. The case takes on a new urgency as they set out to unmask the true perpetrator and bring him to justice before he can strike again. Marcus, realizing that Carl and Assad have once again disobeyed orders, contacts Swedish police, requesting that they confiscate all documents related to Daniel's case and escort the detectives back to Denmark. However, Carl and Assad manage to evade being forcibly sent home by stealing key documents before making their escape. Knowing their time is limited, they head to meet Daniel's former business partner. Upon showing him a photograph, the partner identifies Lars, Daniel's best friend from their time in an orphanage. Meanwhile, Merida finally learns the identity of her captor. Lars, who had introduced himself as Daniel at the Swedish party, had seduced her as part of his twisted scheme. Over the years of her captivity, Lars has annually asked her the same question: why does she think she was placed in the pressure chamber? Merida has no answer, which only fuels Lars' cruel satisfaction. Back in Denmark, Carl and Assad are summoned to the police chief's office. Marcus, furious over their insubordination and misuse of department funds, officially suspends them both. For Carl, this second suspension within a month is a hard blow. Feeling lost, he visits his bedridden colleague Hardy. Hardy, reflecting on their past, reassures Carl that taking risks is part of being a great detective. He urges Carl to follow his instincts and see the case through to the end. Bolstered by Hardy's words, Carl and Assad continue their investigation independently. They track down the orphanage where Daniel and Lars grew up. One of the staff vividly remembers both boys, Daniel, quiet and obedient, and Lars, a troublemaker who ended up in the orphanage after a horrific car accident. This accident sets off a chilling discovery. Lars and Mareda's lives had tragically intersected long before. 30 years earlier, Lars was traveling with his family to a countryside house for New Year's celebrations. During the journey, they were overtaken by a car carrying young Mareda and her family. Bored, Mareda was playing games, covering her mother's eyes. In a moment of reckless fun, she decided to cover her father's eyes while he was driving, not realizing the danger. A truck barreling towards them on the opposite lane caused both vehicles to veer off the road, resulting in a catastrophic crash. When Lars regained consciousness, he saw Mareda, miraculously unharmed, standing amidst the wreckage. Beside her were the lifeless bodies of his younger sister and father. Lars survived with his mother, who was left severely disabled. His hatred for Mareda festered over the years, as he blamed her for the loss of his family. Driven by this burning desire for revenge, Lars meticulously planned his retribution, culminating in her abduction and imprisonment. Lars's life turned into a nightmare in an instant when he lost his closest family members. After burying his father and younger sister, he went to live with relatives, but they turned out to be maniacs. Unable to endure their abuse and humiliation, Lars ran away and ended up in an orphanage, where he befriended Daniel. Gradually becoming a bitter and aggressive teenager, Lars was ready to beat anyone who said anything bad to him. As he grew older, he got revenge on everyone who had wronged him, with Mareda being the last on his list. At a party disguised as his friend, Lars kidnapped Mareda, then got rid of Daniel. Now, Lars lives with his mother, who is confined to a wheelchair. When he notices detectives pulling up to the house, he hides, knowing they're not there by chance. Carl and Assad search the house and then talk to Lars's mother. The old woman lies, saying her son went out to sea and they haven't seen him in 6 months, but the detective doesn't believe her. As Carl and Assad continue to search the area, they find nothing suspicious. Meanwhile, Lars says goodbye to Mareda, reminding her of why she's in the hyperbaric chamber. After cutting off her oxygen, Lars meets the detective and his partner. He knows he might be arrested, but does everything to stall and let Mareda fall into an eternal sleep. Carl and Assad decide to take Lars in for questioning, but the detective realizes something's off. The house has electricity, yet there are several cans of diesel fuel for a generator. Carl figures there's something in the shed using a lot of electricity, and it's probably where Mareda is being kept. Lars realizes he's been exposed, so he attacks Carl, hitting him on the head, and stabs Assad with a screwdriver. Lars escapes, but Carl pursues him and suddenly spots a ladder leading to a secret room. Finding the hyperbaric chamber, Carl calls for backup and stops the oxygen extraction. He reassures Mareda and promises to help her, but Lars turns the lever again and attacks Carl, trying to strangle him. The detective can't fight back, but at the last moment, Assad saves him, knocking out the maniac with a metal pipe. Police and paramedics arrive, and Mareda is saved. A couple of days later, doctors confirm that she's out of danger and is undergoing decompression in a special capsule. Ufa is allowed to see his sister, and Assad and Carl feel good about their work. Marcus realizes he was wrong, so he not only reinstates his subordinates but also lets them pursue their own investigations. Do Lars's actions towards Mareda justify his revenge, given that she was responsible for the loss of his family? What do you think matters more, the punishment itself, or the moral satisfaction of revealing the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments down below, give a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next videos.